Hello, everyone. I am so excited you're joining me for this week's money chat. We are going to be talking all about perfectionism and how perfectionism really starts to mess with our financial goals, how it impacts how we show up in our business, and how to actually overcome it, right? The mindset strategy on how to be able to get to the other side of not having perfectionism kind of take you out and influence your actions or lack thereof, right? Because really what happens with perfectionism is we kind of get stalled out in our business and pursuing our financial goals. So let's dive right in. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Eleanor Prisco, and I work as a money and mindset coach for women. And I am so excited that you're joining me here today and to talk about the money and mindset strategies that influence perfectionism. So first off, to get started, let's talk a little bit about perfectionism and how it can impact how we show up in our business and how we show up in achieving our financial goals. So a huge aspect of perfectionism, myself, I am a former perfectionist. I am someone that was very much conditioned to make sure it was perfect. It was 100% right before, doing something, before committing to something. And as an entrepreneur, that's something that I've had to work to overcome, right? I've had to work to overcome that, it's better to get something out. It's better to do something rather than wait for it to be perfect, because really there's never going to be the perfect time. There's never going to be the perfect email. There's never going to be the perfect post. It's all about creating consistency and showing up and continuing to give value to your audience and your community and your people. And it's about showing up and being consistent versus being perfect, right? Now, of course, when it comes to perfectionism, this can create a lot of challenges, right? When we face situations where we see social media and there's lots of shiny, perfect visions of people's lives, of their businesses, of what's going on. And so it can make us think that everyone is having these perfect lives except for us. And that can cause a lot of stalling out in our business or stalling out in pursuing our financial goals. So I kind of want to talk about these in two separate camps. I want to talk about how perfectionism can negatively impact our business. And also I want to talk about how perfectionism can negatively impact our pursuit of our financial goals. So first off, let's start with the business side of things. So a lot of times perfectionism can come just from obviously maybe how we grew up, right? If you grew up in a traumatic background or potentially in an abusive household, right? It was very important to be quote unquote perfect so that you wouldn't set someone off. And that's something that I am very familiar with. However, that doesn't mean that's the only place it can come from, right? We can develop these perfectionist tendencies also just from how we're conditioned in society, right? How we're meant to show up, how we receive love or attention. And so it's very easy to become a perfectionist. And I think that in general, we tend the mindset community has very much turned towards just reject perfectionism, right? Just be it doesn't need to be perfect, right? And I actually have a different theory on this. So you're definitely going to want to stick around to the end to talk to hear me on how I think the better way of approaching this is, and actually what has been a sustainable way of interrupting my own perfectionism streaks. And has actually led to me being able to achieve my financial goals, led to me being able to stay consistent in my business, led me to be able to continually put offers out there to show up for my clients, and all of that entails, right? When you create your own business and are pursuing the financial goals and vision that you have. So when it comes to the business side of things, perfectionism very clearly can get in the way, right? When it comes to the offer that we're putting out, the posts that we're going to put out, the content that we're going to share, the emails you want to share, continually showing up for a launch, right? Following through the entire launch cycle that you've mapped out for yourself. And this is hard, right? Because the perfectionism trap is that, oh, you need to be perfect with every single one of those iterations, right? And like if you do something wrong, then it's bad, right? It's really, really, really bad. And it can be really activating for our nervous system, right? And we can go into a lot of self-blaming, a lot of shaming of ourselves, like how could we have not known better, things like that, right? And the challenge here is that when we stall out in showing up in our business, right, we create a lack of consistency. And the biggest thing that we can help our community, for our business to grow is show up consistently, to continually talk with your community, your audience, share your thoughts, share, your philosophy on what it is you want to teach and help people change about themselves, their business, whatever it might be, right? So when we buy into perfectionism, right, we buy into the concept that like, oh, we need to wait. We need to wait until things are a particular way. And like, we're not allowed to have what we want now. And we're not allowed to show up just as we are right now, right? That currently how we would show up would not be good enough. And this can come down to, you showing up without having your hair done or having makeup on, or how you're supposed to show up, or having like professional photos or edited photos, or just hopping on a live stream and being able to talk to your audience and communicate with them, right? And it could be even being extremely self-critical of like, oh my gosh, I'm touching my hair too much in that video, I need to re-record it, or I am touching my face, or oh, I stopped to drink some water, right? We pretty much take away all our humanness and are like, oh, we can't do that right now. But really, we're human. And the more that we share our humanness, right, the more we actually give permission to others to show up as their truest selves and show up in like their spaces, whether that be on a public platform as a business or with their own close-knit community, right? And so it's super, super important for us to think through, the implications of buying into perfectionism in our business, right? Is that you chose not to send those emails. You chose not to let people know about those offers. You broke off in your consistency. You didn't go live. You didn't, share those things that were going on in your life that would help people get a better sense of knowing you and trusting you and like realizing that you're just like them, right? So this is a huge aspect in our business. And here's the biggest trap about perfection, right? The perfectionism like concept, right? It's like, oh, I need to do everything perfect. But of course, right, even if you did every single thing perfect and you finally got to the result you wanted, you would look back and you would see that you accomplished it imperfectly, like that there were mistakes made. And yes, you responded and pivoted and like did everything you could to get it back on the right track and you got to the result. But the perfectionist within us would say, yes, but you got here and there was imperfections that happened. Therefore, this perfect result does not count, right? And then we're back in the perfectionism loop. And so this is like the biggest pitfall of perfectionism, because even if we do achieve something, it actually doesn't feel like we've perfectly achieved it, because we are going to like rip ourselves apart in how we did it and like see all the ways we could have done it better. And so even if we achieve that perfect result, we're still not going to give ourselves credit for what we achieved, right? So this is why we really want to turn away from perfectionism, why we want to embrace a different perspective, which I'm going to talk about after, because that's like the business side of how perfectionism influences us in such a negative way. And now I want to talk about how perfectionism can negatively influence our finances, right? And become a big factor in our financial goals, right? So you have financial goals, you have financial desires, as I like to call them, right? Because sometimes financial goals can feel like not that fun, to be honest, right? There's all these ways that we could choose to change the language around our money and have it be an enjoyable relationship. So I like to use financial desires. So you can have these financial desires, right, of building a 6-figure business, building a 7-figure business, traveling the world, having financial freedom, buying a house, being able to send your kids to whatever college they want, being able to send your kids to private school, buying your kids whatever they want, being able to go out and buy a designer handbag, whatever it might be, right? But the whole thing is that we then stall out on pursuing our financial desires because we say that, oh, wait, we're not ready for that, right? Or like, oh, I can't actually do that now. I need to wait until XYZ is in place, right? And so this I see so commonly with clients that come to work with me. And I want to brag here, right? That like the delicious thing is that when people work with me, they actually start to see that their financial desires are 100% possible right now, right? One of the most common ways that this happens for my clients is they have this vision and desire to buy a home, and they're like, I really want to buy a home. I want to maybe potentially buy the house that they're renting. But it's like I so deeply desire to buy a home, but I can't because of X, Y, and Z. Now, those things can be many things. They can be the X, Y, and Z can be because of college debt, so debt to income ratio, potentially having credit card debt, or oh, I don't have enough. I've just started my business and my financial records aren't organized, and so like I'm self-employed and I fully support my husband, and so like we're not in that position. Like, so I can't buy a house because I'm self-employed and I don't even know how that works, right? And banks won't like approve me for a mortgage, or I want to buy a house, but like I don't have the down payment, right? Or I want to buy a house, but the the financial records of our business don't look good enough, right? Or I don't have the financial picture that I would be approved for. Most of the time, these are all false. These are all false beliefs, right? And so it is so interesting when clients come to talk with me and they're like, I have these financial desires, but their perfectionism is getting in the way, and saying, oh, but I can't have these financial desires because of X, Y, and Z, such as the debt that I hold, the income that I have, the financial records of my business. And the thing is, all of those are actually untrue, right? The client that was like, oh, I have too much college debt, there's no way I could get approved for a house, purchased a house, right? The client that was like, oh, I'm the sole provider financially in my household, and so how could we possibly buy the house with only one income in my business? 100% able to do it, right? The person that was like, oh, I don't have the money for a down payment. Actually, she did have the money. It was just in different places. And she didn't know that like you can do early withdrawals from certain retirements for first-time home buyers. And, there was like inheritance money that she was just kind of leaving in a savings account and things like that, right? So there's all these ways that you can pursue your financial desires. And you don't realize it because you're creating this perfectionism loop of not being able to see like, oh, wow, there's actually all these ways that I can start to achieve what I want right now, right? And that's just the example of purchasing a house. This goes for paying off debt. This goes for creating a savings account for the first time in your life. This goes for creating an investment account for your kid for the first time in your life, right? All of those things become available when you start to choose to not buy into the perfectionism loop when it comes to your money, right? It all starts to become available to you. And it's all because you're choosing to show up for your money in a different way. You're starting to see a different perspective of how to engage with your finances, which is exactly what I teach with the feminine finance methodology, right? So it's super important here to actually take some time to think about like, oh, how is perfectionism bubbling up in my relationship with my money? How is it bubbling up in my business? What's going on there? How is it stalling me out in actually taking the first steps that I need to create the life and desires that I want, right? And have. And so I think that that's a really important thing for us to note here, in that, like perfectionism can really stall us out when it comes to actually achieving our financial desires. And so that's why I really want to encourage you to incorporate a different approach to handling perfectionism. So as I said earlier in this video, right, a lot of the mindset world and a lot of content that I see out there around perfectionism very much is like, oh, just like reject perfectionism, right? Now, as a perfectionist, as a former perfectionist, just telling me to reject it, um, and I know this for my clients as well who have also faced perfectionism, it's a lot easier said than done, right? Like it's kind of like, okay, so you're telling me to reject perfectionism, and then what's going to happen is I'm going to like not I'm going to reject perfectionism, right? I'm going to show up. Then perfectionism is going to bubble up and it's going to happen again. And then I'm going to get upset with myself because I did not reject perfectionism perfectly. And it creates this cycle all over again because it's literally like, oh my gosh, like, how am I here again? Right? Because perfectionism can be so deeply ingrained for some of us, especially if we've been conditioned in a very traumatic way around perfectionism. And so I really want to highlight that, right? That like if you have been told, well, just reject perfectionism, just show up imperfectly and we're all imperfect humans and like be imperfect. That's great. However, when it came to being perfect, influencing your physical safety, creating like your mental safety, emotional safety, it can be really, really hard to just tell someone to let go of that, right? And so I want to invite you into a different option here, right? I want to invite you into an alternative perspective around perfectionism that has been really transformative for myself and my clients who have faced perfectionism. I want you to tell yourself that you're perfect now, that the current iteration of yourself is perfect, and you will continue to evolve to be more perfect, right? That you are perfect now and choose to accept yourself now and choose to not be in disapproval of yourself now. Choose to say that your post is perfect, your email is perfect, your offer is perfect, your financial goals for where you're at right now are perfect, right? Because we can bring in a lot of judgment around the financial goals we maybe have of how much money we want, what we want to have in savings, and then kind of reach outside of ourselves because we look around and we're like, oh, well, that's not enough. I should want more. But then it doesn't actually feel good or align. And so I want you to know that your financial desires are perfect now, right? Your business structure is perfect now. Your posts are perfect now. Your live stream is perfect now. That photo is perfect now. Everything about you is perfect now, right? And it's about leaning into accepting ourselves as perfect now because you are a creation of the divine, right? You are a creation of the universal energy. Every single one of us is. And so when we choose to see ourselves as perfect now, right? And that we will continue to become more perfect, right? That we are evolving beings. This is just your current evolution. This is just the current iteration of your evolution. You will evolve to be more perfect, right? We actually can start to see and feel more comfortable and safe of, oh yes, I'm allowed to take action now. I'm allowed to pursue my desires now. I'm allowed to show up in my business now just as I am. And I will gain information, right? And I will gain information that will inform my next evolution, right? And so this is the critical point, right? It's understanding that we will continually evolve, right? And that we will become the more perfect iteration of ourselves as we progress. But so often we want to lean into those challenges, right? Of, oh, I'm not perfect, but really you are. You're perfect right now. Okay. And your desires are perfect. Everything about it, you are perfect now. And this is the very big transformation because it allows us not to be in disapproval of ourselves. Because even when we maybe like fall off the horse and start to go into our perfectionism, we're just like, oh, okay, there's some information I gained here. We don't then need to go into a perfectionism loop around the fact that we were imperfect at letting go of our perfectionism, right? We're able to be like, oh, okay, like I am, I gain some kind of information of potentially what triggers me into perfectionism from this experience. And so That's really what I wanted to share with you today, right? I really wanted to share with you, how perfectionism can really show up in stalling us out in our business, how it can really influence how we show up for our financial goals, desires, and pursue the life that we actually want to create. And an alternative way for you to pursue, overcoming your own perfectionism, because I think a lot of us are conditioned to be perfect, right? To show up in this perfect way. And we can kind of get the subconscious script going, especially when we start to see a lot of social media and think like, oh, this is like the perfect way that I'm supposed to show up. And so I want to invite you into an alternative perspective, an alternative way of approaching handling perfectionism and overcoming it that I know for myself has been so regulating for my nervous system, especially when we're talking about the perfectionism coming from a place of traumatic conditioning. And so that is what I've got to share with you this week on this money chat. Join me next week. These happen every single week live. So if you want to go ahead and join me, just go ahead and subscribe to the channel, or give it a follow. Make sure your notifications are turned on. And I can't wait to see you next week. If there's a topic that you want me to speak on, go ahead and drop it in the comments. If you want anything on mindset, business, money, I'm happy to speak about it. This is really an amazing space for me to be able to share my perspectives in the feminine finance methodology in regards to all of these topics. So with that, I will talk to you all later, and I hope you have a gorgeous rest of your day. Bye.